there's a problem, a real problem, with putting together real data, real information that paints what would appear to be a real picture of Kris Letang's decline. And that's that he always makes you look bad for doing that. Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into football and or baseball. I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates in the same place that you found this. If you put together right now the defensive depth chart for the Penguins, even if you blur left and right together, it's plausible, if not outright likely, that Letang would be your number one. If it isn't Letang, that means Erik Karlsson wasn't traded, and you would see Karlsson as your number one. If Karlsson were to perform as passionately as he tends to do when it involves the Swedish national team. But the case becomes legitimately complicated no matter how strongly you feel about Letang, no matter how passionately he's performed over a career that, in my eyes, for a long time now, has had him ranked as the number one defenseman in franchise history, not just this depth chart. I can get into his basic stats this past season: 74 games, 9 goals, and 21 assists. And most disconcerting out of those figures, he had only 14 points over the final 40 games, and the Penguins were actually a lot better team in that stretch. I could throw all kinds of advanced analytics into this same stew, and it wouldn't come up any better. Probably the point that would be most powerful would be that his Corsi for percentage, that's at 5-on-5, the percentage of shot attempts generated by either team out of the 11 defensemen that the Penguins dressed for at least 3 games, Letang's 49.1 percentage ranked 9th. That's according to Natural Stat Trick. The decline in all of these figures, at the risk of oversimplifying, began the previous season, and it really dived this past season. So here's Letang. He's 38 years old, and he still has, take a deep breath before you hear this, 3 years remaining on his 6-year, $36.6 million contract that Ron Hextall signed him to before the 2022-23 season. Now, the thinking at the time, and Letang made it look pretty good for a while, was he's Letang. He never runs out of energy, not within a shift, a period, a game, a season. In life, we're talking about someone who's been through a stroke, a hole in his heart, which, by the way, had to be repaired just after this past season. It was described as a preventive move and not anything to be worried about. I mean, we're talking about the heart. And yeah, he's the fitness freak to end all fitness freaks. And if anybody was going to be not just able, but also intelligent enough to adjust their training to their age, and yes, that is very much a thing in professional sports, it would be Letang. But to boomerang this back to how I began here, can he be a number one, a true number one, what you would consider to be a general, let's say, number one around the NHL? I'll repeat that I've learned not to doubt him, and I'm not going to do that today if you're waiting on it. But if I had to pick out one facet of who Letang's been through his entire career that he would need to recover more than any other, it'd be the one that's probably the least likely to get recovered. And that is that superhuman stamina that he's shown. His average ice time per game last season dropped down to close to 23 minutes. That's not Letang. Letang's a 28, 29, give me 30, 31, 32 if you're feeling it, minute kind of guy. It might be the thing that's most defined his career, is that he can keep playing, keep skating, keep doing everything in the third period and overtime as if it's still the first few shifts. But how do you get that back if the culprit happens to be the same villain that eventually gets to all of us? Now, could it be if Carlson ends up getting traded and Letang is back in a more prominent role, Matt Grzelcyk's not back, and Letang is your main guy on the power play, he gets some juice from that, he gets some more points from that, he could reclaim something? Yeah, but then that would cast aspersions on whether or not he was playing hard in the 2024-25 season. He doesn't have another way. I mean, yeah, he can look a little odd at times and fall into a funk that can show in some body language, but for the most part, I mean the dominant most part of his career, he's been a high effort in addition to high energy player. So what got me to think about this for this subject for this episode was that I've spent at least parts of a couple other episodes this week talking about the left-handed defense need. And I was kind of concerned that I was casting the right defense as if it's some sort of strength. It's not. It just happens to have two very, very known commodities in Letang and Carlson, and it has legit potential in Harrison Brunick. But yeah, this needs work too, and it needs answers that I'm just going to be honest with you here, I don't have. When we come back, J1Q. Today's J1Q comes from Scott Morgan, who says, DK, I would expect a trade of Noel Acciari and or Danton Heinen to come just before training camp or during training camp for some late round draft picks. And it would be wonderful, wouldn't it, if you could trade one of them for a left-handed defenseman? Scott, I have no idea what you based the first part of that on. Like, it would just happen right before camp or whatever, and late round picks. No idea. So I wish you'd have clarified that part of it, or even if you'd have just said, I'm just kind of winging it here. But I will say, and this is in addition to the Acciari stance I shared on yesterday's show, that I'd very much welcome seeing him get traded. Don't know what they'd be doing with him. And I don't really know that Heinen's much different beyond a known ability to slide up and down your line chart. But I will say that I think Heinen might be a challenge to trade unless there's a team looking for exactly what he does. Meaning, if you need a fourth line winger who's going to be semi-responsible in his own zone and who can every once in a while go on enough of a heater that you're convinced there's more there, only there ends up not being more there. He is on a 2-year, $4.5 million contract that came in the trade with Vancouver, which means he's obviously got a cap hit of $2.25 million for the coming season. He's 30 years old. He's coming off the least productive season of his career, 9 goals and 20 assists in 79 games. You don't want 9 goals out of somebody who's principally an offensive player. And what you really, really, really don't want is the way he can just vanish for long stretches. It's not an effort thing either. It's not like that would actually be a nice, convenient excuse. He just goes through entire games where you don't notice him. And that's despite, I talk about his production this past season, the Penguins' final 5 games. These were his average ice times. This is Heinen. 1342, 1054, 1324, 1530, 1618. That is some serious ice time for someone who's not a first liner or a second liner and who ended up with, to repeat, 9 goals. With the Penguins specifically, in the 28 games after the trade, he had 3 goals, 8 assists, barely even shot the puck, 37 shots. So yeah, he's in that Achari category. You do want to repeat this for these kids to beat out the NHLers. But, let's also kind of hope that they do in a couple of these cases. Otherwise, what's even being achieved from the standpoint of building up a younger, fresher team that makes the playoffs? I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Penguins. We'll be back with another one of these tomorrow.